Imagine just for a moment what it would feel like to walk through a life that truly belongs to you. A life where your choices aren't shaped by fear, performance, or expectation, but by a quiet, persistent truth rising from deep within your soul. So many spend decades collecting titles, applause, possessions, only to find themselves surrounded by everything and still feeling nothing. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded in living a life that wasn't theirs. The pain isn't the absence of success, it's the absence of alignment. And when Jung looked into the lives of those who came to him for help, he saw a pattern few dared to name. They weren't mentally ill in the medical sense, they were spiritually starved. Disconnected from their essence, from their inner authority, from the life that was truly meant for them. And as Carl Jung wrote in his 1954 book, The Development of Personality, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. These unlived lives, they echo silently in our habits, in our relationships, in the choices we inherit, without even realizing. We become actors in a drama written long before we arrived, and yet we keep playing the part, hoping one day it will start to feel real. But there's a whisper beneath the role, that subtle, sacred ache that tells you something isn't right. It's easy to mistake this ache for weakness, anxiety, or fatigue, but Jung saw it differently. He saw it as the soul's rebellion, a signal that you are not broken, only disconnected from yourself, from your truth, from the core of who you are meant to become. And that's the truth no one ever told you. Your unrest is holy. It is not a flaw to be fixed, but a compass to be followed. When we ignore it, the symptoms grow louder: stress, confusion, emptiness. But when we listen, something ancient begins to awaken inside. Jung believed that your relationship with yourself is the foundation of every other structure in your life. And when that foundation is fractured, no matter how perfect your resume, your smile, or your bank account, everything else eventually collapses under the weight of that silence within. Success without self-connection becomes a trap. You achieve more but feel less. You have everything but are nowhere near home. So here's where the journey begins, not by fixing what's outside, but by reclaiming what's within. Not by trying to become someone better, but by remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Choosing yourself is not a one-time act. It's a daily devotion, a spiritual rebellion, an act of courage and clarity, even when it means walking alone for a while, even when it disappoints others, especially when it feels uncomfortable. Because the deeper truth is this: self-love is not self-indulgence. It is sacred responsibility. It is how you honor the gift of being alive. It is how you return to yourself. Now, I invite you to write in the comments, "My soul has been whispering truth in my life." Don't just think it, speak it, claim it. Writing is not just expression, it is the first act of creation. In Jung's view, to name something is to bring it into consciousness. And consciousness is where transformation begins. What you write today may become the path that leads you back to yourself. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix, a quiet despair that no achievement, no vacation, no distraction can silence. And maybe you felt it, the heaviness that arrives when you're surrounded by everything you once wanted, yet none of it feels like it belongs to you. Jung noticed this often. His patients weren't tormented by diagnosable illnesses. They were drained by a life that didn't match their soul. Their minds were intact, but their spirits were starving. Because when we live out of sync with our true nature, even the most beautiful achievements feel strangely empty. The world may applaud, but inside there's only silence. And that silence, Jung taught, is not meaningless. It's a message. He believed the unconscious is not just a container of hidden fears, but a source of deep wisdom. It speaks not in words, but in discomfort. In dreams, in restlessness, in subtle whispers that grow louder when ignored. You feel it when you're at a job that pays well but kills your joy, in a relationship that looks fine on paper but drains your energy. In the moment, you realize you're living a life shaped more by expectation than by essence. That discomfort? It's your inner compass trying to redirect you. Jung made it clear, ignoring the unconscious doesn't make it disappear. It just finds other ways to speak. through anxiety, depression, conflict. Symptoms aren't the problem, they're the signal. They are your truth knocking on the door, and every time you ignore that knock, you're sending a dangerous message to yourself. You don't matter. Your needs can wait. Your truth isn't welcome here. Over time, this self-abandonment becomes a pattern, so normal that it hides in plain sight. You smile, you show up, you perform, but inside, you're fading. And the further you drift from your essence, the more fragmented you become. Jung believed this fragmentation was at the heart of modern suffering, not just emotional pain, but existential confusion, a quiet crisis of identity. We've mastered performance, but forgotten how to be real. We know how to survive, but not how to belong to ourselves. But the moment you begin to listen, truly listen, to that inner voice, something shifts. It's not always dramatic. Often it's gentle, like a curtain being pulled back. You see with new eyes, and you remember you've always had a choice. The world trained you to forget it, but it never disappeared. You can choose to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop chasing a version of success that silences your soul. Jung called this the path of individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be, but who your soul has always known you were meant to become. It's not easy, but it is essential, because without this inner alignment, success turns hollow and joy becomes fleeting. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. It is a return to authenticity, a reconnection with the self beneath the masks. And when you begin this journey, you're not just changing your life, you're healing something ancestral, something collective, something deeply human. Each time you choose yourself, you soften the armor, you clear the fog. You walk and slowly, bravely, back home. Carl Jung once wrote in his lectures compiled under Memories, Dreams, Reflections that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That sentence, so simple and so profound, carries within it the weight of everything you've ever searched for. Because it means your real success is not in what you achieve, but in what you reclaim. In the courage to remove the layers, the masks, the roles, and return to your essence. Individuation, Jung explained, isn't about self-improvement. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming real, more you, less illusion. It is not the pursuit of perfection, but the integration of all that you are, even the parts you were taught to hide. But this path is not for the faint-hearted. Choosing yourself in a world that constantly demands your conformity is an act of quiet rebellion. Every day you're pulled toward performance, toward being liked, accepted, praised. It's subtle but powerful. You compromise just a little. You say yes when you mean no, you smile when you want to scream. And over time, these small betrayals stack up into a life that doesn't feel like your own. Jung warned us, the more we live for others, the more we lose ourselves. Not because others are bad, but because only you can carry the weight of your soul's truth. No one else is built for it. So let's pause here. I invite you to do something rare, something simple. Think back to the last 5 big decisions you made, in your work, your relationships, your daily life. Now ask yourself, how many of them were rooted in your deepest truth? And how many were shaped by fear, by pressure, by a longing to be approved, to be chosen, to not disappoint? Don't judge your answers. Don't turn them into another reason to criticize yourself. Just observe. This moment of awareness, this honest reflection, is the beginning of coming back to yourself. Because clarity doesn't arrive in thunder, it arrives in stillness. And in that stillness, a realization may begin to rise that the life you're craving isn't somewhere out there. It's waiting on the other side of your honesty. You don't need to become someone new. You need to stop abandoning who you've always been. Jung believed that healing wasn't about fixing symptoms. It was about restoring connection to your intuition, to your body, to your inner voice, to your forgotten power. And when you restore that connection, the world around you begins to rearrange itself, because everything external is a mirror of your internal alignment. That's why individuation is not a luxury. It's a responsibility, not only to yourself, but to the people you love, to your community, to the world that desperately needs realness over performance. Jung didn't offer us a blueprint for happiness. He offered us a compass for truth. And truth doesn't always feel comfortable, but it always feels alive. So if you feel restless, heavy, confused, it may not be a problem, it may be your invitation. Because the moment you start walking toward your truth, you are already succeeding in the only way that matters. The parts of you that you hide, the anger, the fear, the desire you were taught to suppress, are not your enemy. They are your shadow. And Carl Jung gave us one of the most powerful psychological truths of all time. There is no light without shadow. He didn't mean this metaphorically. He meant it as a principle of wholeness. The shadow isn't evil, it's exiled. It contains everything you believed you had to reject in order to be accepted. But nothing repressed ever truly disappears. It waits, and it leaks. It shows up in envy, in overreaction, in shame, in the mask you wear to survive, until the day you stop running from yourself and begin the sacred act of turning inward. Jung taught that true healing begins not with more light, but with conscious descent, with facing what you feared inside yourself. He said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This isn't poetic, it's practical. Your shadow holds your unprocessed emotions, your abandoned talents, even your buried creativity. Integrating it doesn't make you dangerous, it makes you real. And it frees up massive amounts of energy that were once trapped in pretending. The energy you used to hide your truth can now be used to create, to love, to connect, to live. Imagine, just for a moment, what your life would feel like if you no longer had to perform perfection. If the voice in your head didn't constantly judge you. If your flaws became parts of your story instead of parts of your shame. This isn't a fantasy. This is the quiet revolution that begins when you stop fighting your shadow and start listening to it. When you stop trying to fix yourself, and instead, you begin to include all that you are. The truth is, self-love that excludes the shadow is not self-love. It's performance, and performance will always leave you empty. To love yourself in a real way means embracing your contradictions. It means saying, I see you, to the parts of you that were never given a voice, to the fears you weren't allowed to have, to the rage you had to silence. And when you do that, something extraordinary happens. You stop living in fragments. You begin to feel whole. This is not about romanticizing your wounds. It's about reclaiming your power. Jung didn't call this process easy, but he called it essential, because only when you stop rejecting yourself can you stop fearing the rejection of others. And that's the paradox. The more you accept what is hidden, the less control it has over you. And the more you love your shadow, the more light you have to offer the world. This is the deep work, the invisible transformation, the sacred labor of choosing all of yourself, not just the polished parts. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful, you need to be whole. And wholeness begins with the courage to say, even this, even the parts I was taught to hide, belongs. Sometimes love looks like silence and softness, but other times love demands strength, the kind that says no with clarity and without apology. Carl Jung once said that knowing your limitations is the beginning of self-knowledge, and boundaries are exactly that, the visible expression of inner clarity. They define the space where your truth ends and where the world must adjust. When you lack boundaries, your energy bleeds into people, places, and expectations that leave you empty. But when you protect your space, you begin to reclaim pieces of yourself that were scattered in the name of being accepted. Setting boundaries is not an act of separation. It is an act of connection. It connects you back to your own values, your needs, your voice. It reminds you that your inner world matters just as much as the demands around you. Jung understood that a life without boundaries leads to resentment, fatigue, and emotional collapse. You keep giving, and the world keeps taking. But every time you say yes to what depletes you, you are quietly saying no to your soul. And no success, no relationship, no amount of external validation can compensate for that quiet self-betrayal. Most people struggle with boundaries because they were raised to believe that love means sacrifice, that being good means being available, that saying no is selfish. But none of that is true. In reality, boundaries are the structure that holds your self-respect. They are how your soul speaks in the language of action. Without them, even love becomes a burden. Even connection becomes a form of exhaustion. The most generous thing you can offer the world is your honest, whole presence. But that presence cannot exist without the protection of limits. So write this now in the comments. I protect my energy because I finally understand my worth. Let it be a quiet contract between you and yourself. A boundary drawn not in anger, but in awareness. A line that says, "This is where I begin, and I am no longer available to abandon myself." Let this be your threshold, the place where an old pattern ends and a new kind of strength begins to take root. When you honor your own limits, you don't become distant. You become deeper, more anchored, more trustworthy. And in that anchoring, the people around you also begin to change. Because real connection does not require you to disappear. It requires you to be present, fully, not as a performer but as yourself. Some people were never meant to fit. They were born carrying questions others are too afraid to ask. They walk through life, sensing more, feeling deeper, speaking truths that make the room uncomfortable. And because of that, they often grow up believing there's something wrong with them. A woman once wrote, "It's not easy when you're truly different, with nothing traditional in your whole life." That sentence isn't just a comment, it's a confession, a quiet cry from the edge. And if you've ever felt like the outcast, the black sheep, the one who just doesn't belong, this part is for you. Carl Jung knew this pain intimately. He once said, "The individual must carry the burden of uniqueness." He didn't say this to discourage, he said it to prepare us, because to walk the path of individuation is to walk through a forest no one else sees. It's lonely, not because you're wrong, but because you're early. Jung warned that those who awaken before the collective often appear mad, not because they are, but because their truth challenges what others haven't yet dared to face. And so, authenticity feels like exile, until it becomes your sanctuary. You see, the world was designed to reward sameness, to make you easy to label, easy to control, easy to praise or discard. But the soul doesn't care about being manageable. It only cares about being whole. And wholeness often means being different, sometimes painfully so, sometimes publicly, sometimes quietly, in the small choices no one notices, but that shape your entire life. And so, if your path feels harder, heavier, more uncertain, don't assume you've gone astray. You may just be closer to truth than most people are willing to walk. The discomfort of not belonging isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that you're becoming, that the mold is cracking, that the old ways of existing no longer fit the person you're unfolding into. Jung believed that true transformation doesn't come by conforming, but by confronting, by facing what feels out of place and trusting that this displacement has purpose. Not everything that hurts is harmful. Sometimes it's sacred pressure, shaping you into someone who cannot go back to sleep. So if you felt different, distant or disconnected, know this: you're not behind, you're ahead, you are not lost. You're being remade, and while this path may cost you comfort, it gives you something far more valuable: alignment. A life that belongs to you, a truth that doesn't require permission, a voice that no longer asks to be understood, only to be honored. There is a kind of wisdom that doesn't speak in logic. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue. It whispers, through discomfort, through dreams, through sudden knowing that defies explanation. Jung believed this was the voice of the unconscious, and that ignoring it was the root of much of our suffering. He saw the unconscious not as a dark pit of fear, but as a well of guidance, a compass made of symbols, sensations, and instinct. And the more you ignore its voice, the louder your life begins to scream, until you listen. Until you remember that silence can be sacred, but avoidance is a kind of self-betrayal. Jung taught that dreams are direct messages from the unconscious. Not random, not meaningless, but metaphors from the soul. They come to guide, to warn, to reveal what your conscious mind can't yet see. That recurring symbol, that unexplainable emotion, that strange scene that lingers after you wake. It's not nonsense, it's navigation. The psyche speaks in images, not sentences, and the more you pay attention, the clearer it becomes. This is why he encouraged people to keep a dream journal, not for superstition, but for connection, to chart the map being drawn inside you. But it's not just dreams, it's intuition, that deep bodily knowing that something is off, or beautifully right. Jung called intuition perception via the unconscious. It's not emotion, it's not fear, it's truth, moving faster than thought. And in a world addicted to noise, we lose access to this deeper frequency. We get distracted, overstimulated, rushed, and in the rush we miss what our soul is trying to say. But when you slow down, when you breathe, when you ask, what is my body telling me? What is this feeling asking for? Something ancient answers back, not in words but in resonance. And that's when it begins, the synchronicities. Jung described them as meaningful coincidences, moments where the outer world aligns with your inner truth. You think of someone, and they call. You dream of a symbol, and it appears the next day. You finally make a decision aligned with your soul, and the path ahead clears. This is not magic. This is coherence. When your inner and outer worlds stop fighting and begin to reflect each other. And the more aligned you become, the more frequent these moments feel, not because life is suddenly perfect, but because you are finally present enough to notice. So start listening to your dreams, to your body, to that whisper you've been trained to ignore. The answers you seek may not come in words, but they are already there, waiting. Jung believed the unconscious was not a threat to be managed, but a teacher to be followed. And when you begin to treat it that way, your entire life starts to reorganize itself around a deeper truth, one that's been inside you all along. You can't build real connection while hiding half of who you are. And the truth is, most of us were taught to trade honesty for harmony, to keep the peace by silencing our truth. But Jung warned that anything we refuse to accept in ourselves will quietly sabotage our lives. When you seek connection from a place of self-rejection, what you attract is not intimacy, it's performance. People fall in love with your mask, and then you wonder why the relationship feels hollow, why you're exhausted, why you feel unseen even when you're surrounded. Because no one can love you fully if you keep offering only fragments. Real love, deep, steady, soul-level love, begins the moment you stop apologizing for who you are. Jung said, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem." That's not a small statement. It means that your relationship with yourself determines your relationship with everything else. When you stop hiding your flaws, your insecurities, your imperfections, not as confessions but as sacred truths, something begins to shift. You're no longer begging for belonging. You're creating the conditions for it to appear. Think about the people you're most drawn to. They're not the most polished. They're not the ones who always have the right words. They're the ones who are real, who don't need to prove anything, who carry their wounds with dignity and their truth without shame. That presence is magnetic, not because it seeks attention, but because it radiates something rare, alignment. Jung believed that people who dared to look at themselves honestly and to accept what they found were the ones most capable of forming meaningful bonds. Not because they were perfect, but because they had stopped trying to be. When you accept yourself fully, you no longer rely on others to give you what you've denied yourself. You don't demand constant reassurance because you've built stability within. You're no longer chasing approval, you're offering presence. And that presence changes the way people experience you. It calms the room. It makes space for others to be real too. Your courage to be yourself gives others permission to do the same. And that is the foundation of intimacy. Mutual recognition, not mutual performance. So if you've ever wondered why your relationships feel shallow, ask yourself, have I been showing up as myself, or as who I thought they wanted me to be? And if the answer makes you uncomfortable, don't run from it. Embrace it. Because in that discomfort is the doorway, the place where old habits die and real love begins. Not perfect love, but honest love, which in the end is the only kind that heals. There's a powerful truth we rarely speak aloud. Not everything you carry is yours. Some of your fears didn't start with you. Some of your patterns were passed down like family heirlooms, invisible but heavy. And when people say, if it's unconscious, how can it be mine? They're naming something real. Much of what drives us isn't chosen, it's inherited. But Jung didn't believe that meant we were powerless. Quite the opposite. He believed that consciousness is how we reclaim authorship, that what is unconscious rules you until you bring it into the light. To love yourself isn't to reject your past. It's to look at it with open eyes and choose, with courage, what continues through you. Jung's idea of the shadow includes not only your personal experiences, but the collective and ancestral energies you've absorbed. Family pain, cultural silence, the roles you inherited without question. You are not to blame for what you were handed, but you are responsible for how you carry it forward. Self-love then becomes a sacred boundary between what shaped you and what defines you. And this is where transformation begins, not by escaping the past, but by confronting it, not with anger, but with clarity. When you recognize what was never truly yours, you can finally stop fighting it. You stop reacting to ghosts. You stop repeating stories that were never meant to be yours. Jung taught that true individuation happens when we differentiate, when we separate our essence from the noise, the history, the projections. Only then can we begin to create something new, not in opposition to the past, but in evolution beyond it. This is the deeper meaning of self-love, not affirmation, but integration, not comfort, but wholeness. It means honoring your story, but not letting it define your future. It means turning pain into wisdom, pattern into choice, inheritance into direction. Jung saw the psyche not as a static thing to fix, but as a dynamic field to navigate, a river with many currents. And your task is to steer, not to drown, to become the author of your own unfolding. So let your healing become a quiet revolution, not just for you, but for those who came before you and those who will come after. Every time you choose yourself with intention, every time you break a cycle with kindness, you are changing the trajectory of more than just your life. You are becoming a living answer to the pain that came before. And that, Jung would say, is the beginning of real power. Self-love is not the final destination. It's the road beneath your feet. It is practiced, not achieved. Chosen, not given. It asks you to return to yourself again and again, especially when it's hardest. Especially when you forget, because the moment you choose to honor your needs, to listen to your soul, to stand by your truth, even when no one claps, you are planting seeds. Seeds of peace, seeds of power, seeds of a life that no longer needs to be escaped from. And the harvest? It goes beyond anything success could offer. It is the quiet joy of finally coming home to yourself. If this message resonated with you, take the next step on your journey. Watch the video appearing on your screen now and continue exploring the mysteries of your mind, your heart, and your true self. Because the world doesn't need another perfect image. It needs you, whole, present, awake.